Hello, my name's Mary Naylor and I'm filming in Mill Road Cemetery as part of the Friends of Mill Road Cemetery History Group. Today we're going to look at 4 graves in the parish of St Andrew the Great. I'm standing on the boundary here, the southern boundary, and all the graves we're going to look at are either on the west wall or over towards the centre circle. In 2015 we were sent some information from the archaeological dig that was happening at the site of the Grand Arcade and John Lewis, and that was just before the building was built. They had an archaeological dig there, and the Cambridge Archaeological Unit uncovered certain artefacts that were pertaining to some of the graves in the cemetery. The grave we're going to is just along here. It's a pretty headstone and tomb with a footstone. It marks the grave of Edward and Jane J, their daughter, who died at 5 years old, and the mother who died only 2 weeks before. And then Anne Marie, who is Jay's second wife. The Jays lived at what is now number 21 St Andrew Street, and the premises are a chocolate shop. Was a grocer, tea dealer and hop and seed merchant. He actually had a new warehouse built in 1845 at the back of the premises, and into that was inset some little wooden blocks with the initials of the family members on, and also his assistant James Baker. Their family were comfortably off. They had 2 servants and they had at least 6 children, but when Jane died, Edward remarried in 1854. In 1855, on a trip to Yarmouth, probably for business, he was suddenly taken ill. The family was sent a telegram and they managed to arrive just in time to say their goodbyes, so his death was very unexpected and sudden. The eldest son, Edward, took over the business in partnership with James Baker, and they together expanded and diversified. We just passed the path that runs to the centre circle, and we're going back into the west wall. This area always has a little path because there is a war grave here and a listed monument behind. We're looking here at the little headstone with carved cross that marks the resting place of Thomas Wicks and his wife Anne. Thomas was born in Cambridge in 1774, and at the age of 18 was apprenticed for 3 years as a cook to the aptly named Samuel Cook. He married Mary Claxton in Tuddenham, in Suffolk, after his apprenticeship was over, and they had their first son, who was born there and is buried also in this parish, but we weren't able to see that monument today. When Mary died after the birth of her 7th child, he moved into what is now number 23 St Andrew Street, which is where he was living when he was cook for Emmanuel College. 2 years after Mary's death, Thomas married Rose Grain. He owned the house opposite the college, Emmanuel College, at what is now number 23. The picture shows the house very much as it was when Thomas and Rose lived there. During the archaeological dig, some of Thomas's named crockery was found. This would have been the crockery that he would have used actually when he was at Emmanuel College, and would have been used in the college. Make sure nobody nicked it. His death was sudden and unexpected, so there was an inquest. The house servant, Charlotte Townsend, gave this statement. He had complained of a little pain in his chest. I gave him a gall's pill. A pill had been used to take. On Sunday in the morning I heard mistress's bell ring. I went to her room and found her on the side of the bed crying out, Master was dead. I went to Master and found he was quite gone. It seemed as if he had gone in his sleep. The coroner recorded death by natural causes, and the 12 jurors had concluded that he died by visitation of God. After his death, the premises were put up for auction and eventually sold in 1860. The house was described as having entrance hall, dining and drawing rooms, 4 bedrooms, 2 kitchens, pantry, storeroom, cellar, water closet, a private office, a clerk's office, a small garden at the rear. So quite a substantial house, which suggested that he had died quite wealthy. Because Mary died in 1808, she is only commemorated here and is actually buried in the parish church of St Benedict's in Bennett Street. Of their children, Anne married Count Antoine Ladislas Brunelleschi and died a countess in Paris in 1860. Their youngest son, Thomas, married Elizabeth, and they had 2 children before she died in 1839. He then married widow Sarah Redfern of Parker's Peace. She was 20 years older than him, and in July of that same year he put an advert in the Cambridge Chronicle. Caution! I, Thomas Wicks, late of 17 Parker's Peace, do hereby give this public caution that I will not be answerable for the debts of my wife Sarah Wicks. Had he married a spendthrift, or had her previous husband run up debts? In 1851 he was in Norwich and Sarah lodging in Cambridge. She died in Cambridge, and Thomas went on to marry his housekeeper in 1876 and died in Yarmouth in 1892, aged 83. Rose Wicks, his second wife, was the daughter of Thomas and Sarah Grain. The Grain family were related to the Burbage family, who was the butler at Emmanuel College, and the Burbage family lived next door to Thomas and Rose. When Rose married Thomas Wicks, she was 33 and became stepmother to 5 children under 12. Rose died at her home in Hills Road, and most of her estate of £300 left to her stepson Claxton. This grave marks the last resting place of 2 sisters, Margaret and Sarah, and their nieces, Sophia and Kate, all Dobsons. Sarah and Margaret were farmers' daughters from Stoke-on-Quye. They ran a school in Cambridge for several decades and probably moved to number 22, St Andrew Street about 1820. Sophia and Kate were the daughters of their brother Joseph. Just found out this morning that Joseph rented the property, and we know this as in 1835 his name was removed from the voters list because it was discovered that he did not actually live there. The earliest archaeological evidence dates from 1841, when the school had 7 female pupils aged 7 to 15, mainly from local villages, plus 2 servants. Several features were dug up in the garden which contained ceramics, glass, animal bone and other materials from the whole household. Of particular note were some slate pencils and cups for the children decorated with moralising images and texts such as, "For I have food while others starve." Let's hope they all ate up their food well. Margaret died in 1870 and Sarah, despite becoming an invalid, carried on teaching for several more years and died at the age of 91 in 1886. Kate and Sophia went on to form their own school in Regent Terrace, and they took in boarders for the nearby high school and prepared small boys for public school. They both saw in the new cemetery and died in their mid-80s. Lead on, Paddy. To the left, to the left. So we're now walking toward the centre circle. So we're going to have a look at the monument for James Baker. If you remember, he was Edward Jay's assistant who took over the shop at number 21, St Andrews Street. Ahead of us we can see the monument that was made on top of the chapel. So not really monument, more of an artwork. This pillar would have had something on the top which is now missing, and it's James and Anne Baker. They were both born in Melbourne in 1820, and they lived with Jays from probably James at least from 1843. After he'd gone into partnership with Jay's eldest son, Edward Jay, as well, Edward sort of got into financial problems and eventually left Cambridge. So James took over the business, carrying on as a grocer and hop and seed merchant. And when he died, his wife Anne took over for a further 8 years at that same shop. There's more about all these families on our website, so do enjoy.